of Amaxra, and I think Beth actually set this one up. And really, really appreciate doing this and everybody showing up. And I know we're going to hand out. I don't know the logistics, but I know we're going to hand out coffee cards because that's what we do always when we're done. So with that, I will hand it off to you, David. Thank you for doing what you're doing, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for that great introduction and good morning. My name is David Obelcz, as they said, and I am the principal consultant of Baden Hill Group. Baden Hill Group's been around since 2016. We're a marketing agency based out of Kirkland, Washington, and we serve generally the western coast of the United States. So once again, thank you. And today we're going to be talking about storytelling and compelling storytelling in a very interesting time. The great thing about this is a lot of this is going to be aligned to business storytelling, right? Because, there's like narrative storytelling, like writers. This is going to be more focused on business. And what I'm going to cover today is going to be just a crash course in storytelling and transferable skills that you can use, not just in business, but say if you're in a position where you're finding yourself in a job search, because as we know that there's been a seismic shift that's been going on in this country that COVID-19 has created. There's going to be information here to help you with that. We're also going to cover when to use PowerPoint, when not to use PowerPoint, what's the right way to use PowerPoint. And I'm also going to be covering how to look good on video, because all of us are kind of doing this video chat thing. And of course, some of it is pretty fun and hysterical when things don't go well. But I'm going to be covering some tips and tricks on how you can look better when you're on camera. And so with that, why don't we get started in storytelling? The first and the most important thing when you're going to tell a story is you need to mind map your story. You have to prepare. It is particularly in business writing, you just can't sit down and go and start writing. And so in part of doing that, the first question you have to ask yourself is, who is my audience? And when you think about your audience, you can break them into three buckets of economical, functional, or technical. And so when we think about an audience, an economic buyer or an economic audience, they are metaphorically or literally the person with the checkbook. They are the decider. They are the one that if you are trying to inform, convince, or describe, and we'll get into what all that means in a little bit, they're the ones that will be making the decision. They may literally make the decision, they may metaphorically make it. The next one is a functional reader, a functional buyer. The functional reader or the functional listener of your story is somebody that will be using the product or service or concept that you're trying to sell. And they have a different need and different wants, and they want to hear different things in your story than an economic buyer. The next one, or again, an economic audience. The next one is your technical. And a technical buyer or a technical audience, they're into speeds and feeds. They generally want to be convinced because they are trying to make a technical evaluation on the story that you are trying to tell. And it is very possible, if you think of marketing, if you put a marketing spin on storytelling, it is very possible that someone can be an economic, functional, and technical buyer all at the same time. Let me give you an example of this. If you go onto Amazon, because right now we generally can't go into stores, but if you go onto Amazon because you need to buy pens and you're buying a box of, say, classic Bic pens, right? You are an economic, functional, and technical audience in the selection of the process. So if you're reading information about pens and you're looking at a box of 10, you care about an economic standpoint because you're the person with the checkbook. You're making the decision. You're a functional user. You want the pen. You want to be convinced that this pen's going to be comfortable in your hand. It's not going to smear ink all over the paper. And you're the technical buyer. You want to make sure that it's blue or it's black or they don't have erasable ink. I just gave away my age. They used to have erasable ink. It really didn't work. End of story. But let's go back to that same pen analogy. Let's say you are a product manager, because everything in the world that is ever made has a product manager behind it. And you're a product manager for pens, and you're selling pens, those same Bic pens, into Microsoft. My material and the story that I'm going to tell is going to be very different to that audience because I'm selling to a purchasing agent. That purchasing agent is an economic buyer, and they're probably the technical buyer, but they're not the functional user. The functional user are all of the employees over at Microsoft. Now, if the functional users aren't happy, they're going to go to the economic and technical buyers and tell them. So you need to understand who your audience is and mind map and break down to that. The next thing you need to look at is, What is their motivation? When you're telling a story, people are generally motivated by three things. One, the reward and value system. And so what I mean by that is, if you're going to tell a story in a business setting, you either have to convince somebody or make them understand that this will align to the rewards. This will help me get promoted. This will put more money in my pocket. This will help me look good. This person is going to help me achieve goals that I need. This aligns to my rewards. The next one, which is a little softer, is aligns to your value system. So if you think more in public sector, or if you're dealing and creating stories and telling stories in charity organizations, social organizations, and you're trying, say, to solicit money, because there's a lot of organizations right now because everyone's financially hurting and they can't do fundraising activity on a large scale, right? They can't do in person. So you have to align to their values. If you give to this my organization, you are supporting things that are important to you. The second thing is about giving somebody their perfect day. I'm going to help give you your perfect day. So if you think, say, of an interviewing situation and you're being asked situational questions, part of what you're trying to convince that person interviewing you if you're talking, particularly if you're on an interview loop, and let's say you're talking to your boss or your potential future boss, you're trying to convince that person, I'm going to give you the perfect day if you hire me because. You're never going to say, I'm going to give you the perfect day because, but that is the underlying story that you're trying to do. And then the last one is, you're going to take away worry. I'm going to help you sleep better at night. I'm going to help mitigate risk. And this is how I'm going to do it. So now we've kind of covered in mind mapping, who is my target? What is their motivation? How is their brain wired? That then moves into the next thing. What are you trying to do? Remember, I kind of dropped these words a little while ago and I said, I'm going to explain what they are. Well, here we are. So the first thing is inform, right? That is one of the primary things in telling a story. I'm going to inform you about something. And it means just what it means. I want my audience to be informed. I want them to draw their own conclusion after they have been informed. The next one is convince. I want to convince you of something. And convince is particularly if you're doing a job interview, right? You are working on convincing your audience. At the end of the day, what's the end goal? I want to convince my audience that I will align to the reward system, take away worry, and give them their perfect day through, right? And that is how you're going to be convincing an audience, or hopefully convincing the audience. And we're going to get more into the pieces of how you put all this together. But right now, what we're just talking about is, we haven't even gotten to writing the story yet. This is just identifying those foundations. The next thing is describe. And if you think of describe simply put could be more of like your classic technical writing. So if we think about telling a story potentially could be about, let me explain to you how you're going to use this device and how this device or software is going to give you the perfect day, right? But then you are going to describe the process that goes through that. Because let's go back to that audience. Let's say you're telling a story around a product or a service, and your audience is somebody who's functional, somebody who is going to be the end user of your product. What motivates a functional user? They want their job to be made easier. They want you to make life easier for them. But they don't want you to make life so easy that they're worried that you're going to take your job away through technology or process improvement. So you have to be careful in what you're describing and what that perfect day is, and have that light touch to explain to them, I'm going to make things easier for you. And this is how I'm going to do it. And you want them to go, okay, I get that. You don't want to get them and go, wait a minute, if you do all this, I'm not going to have a job. So those are your three things that you're trying, one of the three things you're trying to do. Can you combine them? So in other words, can I do inform and describe? Can I do convince and describe? Absolutely. But if you narrow it down to what you're really trying to do, it makes creating the story that is much more focused to an audience and the audience that you're trying to speak to. And here's the next thing. What do you want your audience to learn? I think there may be a trend that you've noticed here, which in all of my slides, and I will tell you, it's not in all of the slides, but you generally should stick to 3 points. And the reason you should stick to 3 points is a couple. First of all, it's very, very easy to remember as you're speaking in an audience, particularly if you don't have notes, if you're presenting, such as I am right now on camera. What are my 3 points? What are my 3 points? If you have 5, you have 7, if you have 9, or if you haven't even established your 3 points you want to get across, you're just going to go all over the place. That's the first thing. The second thing is breaking things down into 3 points forces you to be crisp. And if you can't explain it in 3 points, that is a red flag that maybe you don't understand it itself. Now, just as I said, there are certain things you just cannot explain in 3 points. Let me give you an example, actually, on a presentation that we're working on, another class that I'm going to be doing next week on Wednesday. We have 3 presenters, and the discussion came up because they wanted to do 10 subjects. And as a storyteller, I'm like, 10 topics. Audiences, the eyes are going to glaze over. It's too much. So I told them, let's break this out like a baseball game. And what I mean by baseball game is you have 3 batters up. You have 9 innings, right? There's all these things of threes, lots of threes in baseball. So what we did is 3 core buckets, 3 topics in each of those buckets. The speakers are divided among that. Now each speaker has 3 topics. Everything is broken up into a larger group of 3 separate discussions or 3 separate focuses. So it's much easier for the audience to move in and out in the presentations they're going. And then the last thing is less is more. There is a really, really famous quote from Mark Twain, which is, I would have wrote a shorter letter if I had more time. And of course, everybody, well, that's real witty, but there's a lot of truth to that. Quality storytelling, quality telling of stories through audio and written and in video takes time to prepare it. And so you really need to work on minimizing your words and going with less is more. And now what I want to get into is the foundation of building your stories. And that foundation is SOAR. And so what SOAR is all good stories that starts with the situation. Once upon a time, right? Very, very cliche. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Now begins the winter of our discontent. All of those are situational statements. Right. And I'm using, of course, more literary terms than I am in business terms. But the first thing you want to state is very clearly, what is the situation that you want to address? The next thing you want to talk about is the opportunity. And generally, particularly in business storytelling, you want to frame things in a positive light. And let me give you an example of what can happen when you frame things in a different light. I want to qualify what I'm going to explain here very, very closely. I have a rescue dog. I think the ASPCA does great work. But if anybody watches any amount of late night TV, and I think a whole bunch of us are watching late night TV right now, the ASPCA, right, runs these heartbreaking ads about animals who are abused. And this is a very, very worthy cause. But these are polarizing ads for people, right? Some people are just revulsed by them. And of course, other people are compelled. Now, that is an extreme example of storytelling aligning to values, right? I am going to go ahead and I'm going to inform and describe and try to convince you, right? It's real heavy in the convince, but there's inform and describe in there also. And I want to align to your value system that you love animals, and that's the appeal that we're going to, right? The challenge that those ads have is that although they talk about the opportunity, right? If you donate, you'll be able to help. The way that it is presented as a very extreme problem, and people don't like negativity. I would even say right now, because if you just look on social media or turn on the TV for 2 minutes, you are bombarded with negativity right now. So you really should frame things in opportunity. The other thing, particularly in business, is understand your upline. And what I mean by your upline is your managers as you are going up through that organization. There are some executives that have almost a military approach. They want to know the situation on their ship. There are other executives, they don't want no bad news. Don't give me no bad news. They want everything framed in a positive light. So think of opportunity. What is the opportunities we have? The next thing then is the action. We had this situation, we had these opportunities. Here are the actions that we took. Here are the things that we did. And then, and the actions, of course, are just, this is what we did. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then that gets to the results. Because we took these actions, these are the results that happened. And then here's the other thing. When you talk about actions and results, go back to the rules of three. We took these actions, 1, 2, 3, and these ended with these results. Result A, result B, result C. It grounds your story. It pulls things in. And then if you're thinking about in marketing, if you're writing a positioning or messaging statement, when you're writing positioning and messaging, there's a 25-word statement, there's a 50-word statement, there's a 100-word statement. And those aren't hard and fast rules. There's a lot of times it's 30 words, it's close. It's 98 words, it's close enough, right? It's not a hard line. But if you have point A, point B, point C, and you're condensing down those stories to get, you got to have your 30-second elevator pitch, right? Everybody tells you that. Then you can kind of look at what's the most important bullet, and then you can strip the other two out. Well, I did this, that resulted in that. And then they can go ahead and ask probing questions. If you go to Baden Hill, not right now, but if you go to badenhillgroup.com, go to the blog, go to the first blog that was ever written on there. There's a whole thing on there about storytelling and actually breaks down the 1977 movie Star Wars. I specified the 19 because there's so many of them now. And it's like, well, it's episode 4, but is that movie 4? What does that mean? The first Star Wars movie, which is the 4th Star Wars movie, if you're really into the Star Wars thing, that's a source story. The whole movie is a source story. Situation. Empire's built the Death Star and they're going to blow up the whole thing. Opportunity. Luke's family is killed. He finds the droids. He has an opportunity to go ahead with Ben Kenobi, learn the Force, and get off of there. Actions. We attack the Death Star. Result. Blows up. We have slowed the Empire down in their quest of controlling the universe, or the galaxy, I should say. There you go. Source story in 20 seconds. And I go into a whole thing in Star Wars and how Star Wars is a source story. So go ahead and you can go read that there, but not right now. So if you're doing storytelling, this is the foundation and the tools you should go to as you start to outline your story and develop it and mind map it out. The next thing we have is who are your characters, the cast of characters that you're going to have in your story, because that's important too, because that is how you build emotional connection. If you're going to be telling compelling stories, you have to build an emotional connection with your audience so that your audience can put themselves and identify in the story. That's why I kind of use that ASPCA example. For the targets that they're going after in that advertisement and in that story, they're trying to build that deep emotional connection. And for the people that respond to that ad, that is a visceral and deep emotional connection for them. It's a powerful story, but it's a very narrow story. So the first thing you need is your protagonist. Well, what's a protagonist? The protagonist is your central character of the story. It is the person that the story revolves around. Let's use an example of writing a case study. Case study is a great example of business storytelling. And if I go back to, if you're interviewing or you're looking for a role, or if you're in the consulting space, right, and you're looking for that next thing, you're in the space, but you're looking for the next thing. Generally in those things, the protagonist is the person that this case study revolves around. This is Bob, right? And then you get into SOAR. Here's Bob's situation. Bob had to solve a security issue at the company, and these are why. Goes into the opportunity. The next thing you need to have is your champion or your villain. So the champion is the person that is ultimately, if you look at a case study, your champion is typically an executive that has said to Bob, I need you to solve this problem, and I'm going to be monitoring this problem to make sure that this problem gets solved. Now, if we go from opportunity and shift opportunity to the challenge, we then are telling the story from a villain standpoint. And that can be okay in storytelling. Let's go back to this example of telling a story around network security. If Bob is being told you have to solve the security problem because we had a security breach and our database of 5 million customers got leaked into the dark web and it ended up in the news and we had a 60-minute news crew waiting outside of our office on a Monday morning, right? That then becomes the villain in the story. We don't know exactly who the villain is because they behind the curtain, the dark web, but you still have your villain. And then that becomes the protagonist has to Provide for the champion, give the champion what they want, or defeat the villain. And you see this in classic storytelling. But again, this applies to business. It applies to so many things in life. And then the next thing you need is the hero. Now, the hero can be the protagonist, but if you think about case studies, really good, compelling case studies, if you ever read, generally has this other person that comes in, right? Because our protagonist is, well, I have to solve this problem. It's a really huge challenge. I'm a smart individual, but how do I go about and do that? And typically in a case study, the hero is the company that has come in and helped, right? Well, we partnered with Mary from Microsoft, who solved these particular security issues for us and had us deploy things this way in the Azure cloud, problem solved. And so those are your minimum cast of characters. So a compelling story it has to have a protagonist, because otherwise you don't have a story. But there should be a champion or villain, and there also should be your hero, the person that comes in the story to help and solve the problems or tackle the opportunity. I've already kind of touched on the rule of three, and I'm going to go into a little bit more on why that is so critical. First thing is, when you're speaking, it makes things so much easier to remember. And I'm going to get into, I'm going to shift a little bit in the coming slides on why it isn't just about laying the foundation for the stories, but then kind of do's and don'ts when you're actually telling your story. The next thing is, it keeps you from rambling. It's very, very easy if you don't have things grounded in your head to hey, I'm going to sidebar. I'm just going to go off here. And your audience is like, what are you talking about? And I've seen this happen. And you've seen this happen in presentations or people who are trying to tell something really important. And some neuron fires off in their brain and they're just off. Boom, off to the races. And sometimes you're like, they never got to what they were going to tell me. That was really interesting. Sometimes it'd be very dynamic. That was super interesting, but they didn't get to where I wanted to get. So it keeps you from rambling and it stays. The other thing is, it's just much easier for audience to absorb that information. They're going to pick three things. Now, something really important of making 3 points. You generally don't want to go, I'm going to make point 1. I'm going to make point 2. I'm going to make point 3. You can do that in your head, but you generally don't want to go, let me tell you with this. I did 1, I did 2, I did 3, because that's just going to get really weird. It's going to get weird in a writing standpoint. It's going to get weird on video. It'll get weird person to person when one day we can be person to person again. So keep those things in mind. You may have your 3 points in your head as you're talking, but don't necessarily call them out. Use language, use others' tasks and tactics to go ahead and express that. Now, we've kind of got it into, all right, I want to tell a story. Now let's kind of start getting into the do's and don'ts. You don't want to see this with someone looking at your PowerPoint deck. How many of us have looked at PowerPoint decks or sat through presentations like this, and this is how you look? I know I have. I've been there. All right. We probably all saw the stories. They were on July 5th in 2017 Forbes. This was revived in August 2019. It was all over LinkedIn. It was all over the blogosphere. PowerPoint is worse than useless. Right. And this was, the Harvard University concluded PowerPoint wrong. It's not. The study that was done, if you actually go back to the 2017 story, was they were comparing PowerPoint to other platforms. And they had people come in the audience who were not familiar with the other platforms and were familiar with the other platforms. And so what it was almost like a competitive case study situation of PowerPoint versus Prezi versus Keynote versus, and seeing things in different ways. So how are these not worthless and those are worthless? So people read too much into the headline on that. The second thing, as I said, was this was an A/B comparison. And then the most important thing is a lot of people are doing PowerPoint wrong. You know, PowerPoint's really an amazing tool. It's been around for decades. It's a powerful presentation tool. It's created an entire industry of people who create slides and presentations for a living. You can use it for executive presentations, for academia, for government, and small business support. For example, Fiverr and Thumbtack and people on sites like that use lots of PowerPoint slides. There are similar tools to PowerPoint. I just mentioned a few. For instance, there's Prezi, and there's Keynote, and there's Google, and there's Slides, and Google Slides, I should say, and so much more. And to start creating your PowerPoint presentation, you can use many of the available templates that they have out there. No, unacceptable. No. Don't do. I'm going to get into why I don't do this. I have a slide for don't, but this is bad. This is a bad slide. This is a bad way to present. Let me give you another example here. Thank you, everybody, for coming into the room today. We're going to be doing a review on Acme comparative of cost modification modal models from January 2018 to March 29 extrapolated. We're going to be going through 13 data points of widgets, sprockets, interocitors, capacitors, bearings, and couplings. And if, first of all, I really want to call out our interocitor business on section 9 was doing really great this year. If you take a look on this slide, no, this is terrible. This is a terrible slide. This is a terrible slide for so many reasons. And this is not effective storytelling. This is, you don't want that. Don't. First of all, don't read your slides. If you have put a wall of text on a slide and you're just up reading those points on the slides, what you've just done is you've created a crutch. You've built speaker notes. Now, I know what some people are going to say, but then if the people leave the audience and they don't, right, if I hand out my slide deck and they leave, they have kind of no information. The slide deck should be enhancing your presentation. It shouldn't be the presentation. That's not what PowerPoint was meant to do. And if you have put thought into the story that you want to tell, both in person, in words, and in your slides, very, very small points still tell the story. You still have an effective deck at the end of the day. Don't build walls of text. And I'm going to get into the do's, but walls of text are bad. Don't build over-engineered complex visuals, because what happens is if you have walls of text, they're not listening to you. You're getting two things. They're reading the walls of text. Worse, if they have the deck in beforehand, they're probably going through click, 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 and reading all your points. They're not going to listen to what you're trying to say. And if you were trying to do a convince in particular or a describe, they're checked out. Inform, then that's fine. But then did you have to have the meeting in the first place if you wanted to do inform? The problem with complex visuals is people can just get lost in it, right? That chart that I showed with all these different things and arrows, and it's not something except for a really very specific audience is going to look to. Now, I know you're probably going, but I have executives that want to dig into this stuff. That's great stuff to put in the appendix. If you're going to have, and you know, it's like there's always this one person when I get up to tell a story, and it's just Captain Pedantic, and they're going to want to see, put it in the appendix, because then you can just look them in the face and go, why, yes, we have that cost comparison slide from January 18, from March 2019, including interocitors, and you can find that in the appendix, and then they will flip to the appendix and go. If they have deeper questions, they are going to go. You as the presenter then have to decide in your audience, do I answer that question, or do I say, you know, that's a great question, I would love to take that offline with you. And again, you're going to have to read and understand your situation. If you're standing right, if you're a consultant and you got the GM of an organization of Microsoft, you're probably going to have to dive into it. And we've all gone through these experiences where, well, my whole PowerPoint deck just got hand grenaded, which is all the more reason you shouldn't have walls of text and huge graphics, because it takes a lot of time to do it. Let's get into the do. 6-word bullets. Now, here's something I want to say. I worked for somebody once a long time ago. The temples are gray. It was a long time ago. And they were maniacal on the 6-word. If you had 7 words, it was like, no, unacceptable. Go back and do it again. 6 words. Don't drive yourself crazy like that. It's a guideline. If you have 8, it's okay. If you have 5, it's okay. 6 words is a guideline. Use appropriate visuals. A really good example of this, and I say this really cautiously because I do not want to get into this is charged. Al Gore and the Inconvenient Truth, and he did a whole bunch of these PowerPoints and visuals and slides. I don't want to get into the whole whether was that right, was it wrong? Let that go. The visuals were really good. That was a great example of simple visuals to tell a story. I don't want to get into the debate on what the story was. And then the next thing is go back to SOAR. When you're telling the story, situation, opportunity, action, results, always go back to that. Now, I spent time at Amazon. It was at Microsoft. I was also at Amazon. And when it comes to storytelling, Microsoft and Amazon are about as far apart as you can get, not just internally, but also externally, right? Microsoft uses a lot of kind of concepts and language, and it's definitely a little more marketing and salesy externally. If you look at Amazon, it's generally, when you look at AWS, it's just the facts, ma'am, please. Just the facts. I hit the wrong one. It was Law and Order. I had Dragnet, but I think you get the point. Anyway, most of you probably don't even know what Dragnet was, and it gives away my age. Amazon, on the other side, just the fact, and internally, like PowerPoint, that's a good way to ruin your career there. Everything there is written. I don't think that there is a right or a wrong way. I think in working at Amazon, it was like, this would have been a lot better to tell the story in a PowerPoint deck. And there have been times at Microsoft where I would say this would have been much better as a written narrative. At the end of the day, you have to tell the story as your audience wants. So when should you do a narrative-based writing similar to what is done inside of Amazon? Is your audience making fact-based decisions? Do you have to supply to them, there's the situation, here are the opportunities, here are actions, and then they have to decide? That is, writing might be better than a bunch of visuals. The next thing is you want to drive a decision, right? The reason for that is if you get in a PowerPoint deck, you're by default opening things up to, okay, let's have some questions. And when you get that, you may not be able to even get to drive your decision. You all of a sudden get into rat hole mode. And then the last thing is it gives you a better opportunity to explain your thought process, and it forces you to really mind map out your story, which gets into my next point, modified SOAR. And how can you modify SOAR? Because there's a trick that you can use here if you are trying to get people to drive a decision. So you get 2 for the price of 1. We had talked about situation, opportunity, action. We're going to change the R. Recommendation. So now if you're trying to drive a decision, and you can do this again in PowerPoint, you get into what the situation is, you get into what the opportunity or the challenge is. You then make 3 recommendations. Or when I say recommendations, you make 3 suggestions for actions. Here are 3 possible actions we can take. 1, 2, 3. And then you go into the situation and the opportunity for each of those. If we do this, situation is the opportunity corrects pros and cons. Then when you get our recommendation, that is where you make your recommendation. I recommend we do this, and this is why. Discuss. This is actually classic Amazon AWS narrative writing in both 2-pagers and 6-pagers. So at Amazon, if you're not familiar, they have things called 2x2. I'm not going to get into that. It's a 2-page written narrative that basically is situation, opportunity, action, recommendation. When I was there, I was like, I got this. I got this is easy. I like this. And then they have a 6-pager, which is essentially still situation, opportunity, action, result. It's just with a lot more details. A 2-pager might be, we have this thing that we're solving in about 6 weeks, where your 6-pager might be, say, your annual plan. And yes, if you have to write out an annual business plan for an entire Amazon web service and it got to write it in 6 pages, it is hard because less is more. All right, video for storytelling. There's a whole bunch that are at home now and probably at home for the foreseeable future. And we're all using video to tell our stories. And a lot of times you're a passive listener. When you're a passive listener, it is okay to be kind of wandering off and looking around, and maybe you got a t-shirt on and nobody's seeing what you got on below the waist. And so that's how you're going to roll. But if you're going to be actively talking, and there are things you need to do to have yourself look good. The first thing is, if you're going to be presenting, your preparation is critical. Mind map, SOAR, have your 3 points. We've already beaten all 3 of that. I don't have to go into that again, unless you haven't been listening for the last 35 minutes or so, and then I can't help you. Successful video requires planning. The first thing is you need good lighting. Now, I'm sitting in here right now, and I actually have 3 studio lights on me. And I know you're like, hey, rules of 3. Actually, there's a thing with studio lighting, 3 lights. And so I even have a hair light over on this side here, which is, even though I don't have much hair anymore. Light is really important. It's one of the most important elements, because you probably watch videos where people look like they're in a darkened room, or they, for instance, and we'll get into background a little bit, but maybe the sun's just hitting them on one side of the face and they're just all blown out. So worry about lighting. The next thing is audio quality. No, you don't need to get the fancy Shure microphone and a mixing board and a compressor and all that other stuff. But having a decent microphone, and at least making sure that your audio quality is good, that it is at appropriate volume, that it is clear, that there isn't any static or popping in that is really important. Well, how do you go about doing that? What you can do is simply set everything up as if you're going to be on the conference or the presentation you're going to do. Make a little recording of yourself and then listening to the recording. Does the recording sound right? The next thing is background. And I have a couple of different things with background. I'm doing something with storytelling because I want to be really clear, because I want to say you want to have a distraction-free background. Of course, some of you might be going, hypocrite, look at your background. There's all this stuff behind you. I'm doing a thing on storytelling. A lot of the stuff behind me tells stories. And so that is why I have that. What you don't see is over here is I have a background that I can pull in behind me here so that I can have a white background or a dark background. I'm not saying you got to go out and do and get all of this stuff, but background is important. Let me give you an example. We were shooting a video a week or 2 ago. We had an individual, we were setting things up. They were in their home study. Behind them was a daybed. And on the daybed were a couple of pillows. Now, in the way that they were sitting in the chair, what it created the illusion of is that there was a very messy bed behind them. And so this is a great example of something that can be distracting, or go like, what kind of sloppy room are they in? And then they're like, who has a bed? You know, because it was like this frilly, lacy thing. It was a little weird. We just said, hey, go ahead and take those pillows off the bed and just hide them. Boom. It looked immediately better. It was another person, they had a picture on the wall, and I mean, the picture was crazy crooked. And it was, these are the little things. Look around on your background. Another thing is I was asked to edit a webinar a few months ago, and on one of the presenters, they're great. They're framed up, their lights right and everything, but they were in their bedroom, and you can kind of see the corner of the bed, but there was somebody on the bed while they were presenting, and you could see their legs going like this the whole time, totally distracting. And where it was sitting, not a whole lot we could do from post-production standpoint. So great examples on where background can help tell a story, or it can help hamper the story. The next thing is the camera position. I have my camera facing so that I'm looking straight at it. And you're not looking up my nose, because you don't want to have, right? You don't want the camera looking up at you. You want the camera kind of looking just a little bit down at you. And that gives you a much better view, because it helps hide the double chin that a lot of us have, even if we're all in great shape. And it just is more flattering to have that camera just up a little bit. So if you can't get the camera position right, for instance, let's say you're in a laptop, right? And you have the laptop kind of angled this way, and so you're already getting the up nostril, get a few books or get something and raise that laptop up, and now the camera will be looking at you a little down. And that is something you can preview before that you get on there. The next thing is personal appearance. If you're presenting, and it's real easy right now, right? We are seriously in an era right now where people are waking up and going, is it Wednesday? Is it Thursday? Like, even as I said this, I was like, oh yeah, it's Friday. I wanted to go, is it Thursday or Friday? There, my point's made. And so it's real easy to just go, yeah, I'm rocking this in sweats. If you're in an audience and no one's going to see you, rock it in sweats, go ahead. If you're presenting, you should be dressing the way that you want to dress. Now, you may be looking at the slide where I go here and go, she's wearing a jean jacket, David. Yes, I get that. Sherry over here is a tremendous presenter. She is fantastic online. And the jean jacket, that's her audience. That is who she's going for. And so that works for her. And then the last thing is mannerisms. I talk with my hands. I got 25% Italian genes in me. So the hands are going all over the place. But one of the things is if I don't raise my hands on a camera and I'm down here, all you just kind of see is my elbows rolling around. You don't see my hands. So in my mannerisms and being aware, and I know that I talk with my hands, what I've consciously kind of developed is if I'm going to use my hands, bring them up here so people can see what I'm doing with my hands. So then they're not like, what's going on down there? The other thing is when you're on camera, you would just be stunned. Everybody has tics. If you're on the other side of the camera in video production, one of the first things that you'll observe is everybody has tics. I have tics. I probably can count on one hand with fingers left over on people who weren't professional actors or didn't spend like their life in front of a camera who didn't have some kind of tic. For some people, it's so. For some people, they start every sentence with a. These are the things you have to work on in catching. For some people, I know one mine. If my hair's longer, I start like fussing with my hair, running my hands through my hair. Everybody has the tics. Figure out what your tics are and then work on not having them. And it's a lot harder to do than it is to say. So how do you look good on camera? If you are going to record, if you're going to make a self-recording of yourself, because this is something that people are doing, and the interesting thing in the times that we're in, the quality bar, what is acceptable, has gone down. If you're watching any form of TV, you're starting to see a number of TV ads that are clearly just shot on a cell phone or a webcam, and like the audio is kind of a little warbly, and the phone is being held this way. Don't hold your phone this way for a video. Don't, please. Is this way. It's always this way. Thank you. I just went off topic, but that's really important. If you're going to be making videos at home and you're going to be doing some very light editing, so there's software out there, right, where it's like, well, I can just take this clip and that clip and go out. This is something really simple that you can do if in each of your takes and each of the things you're going to do. You settle, so get yourself and you sit up straight. Oh, you can't doing this. Well, I guess you can kind of look down at my little screen here. You settle, you take a deep breath, you hold it, you let it out, you smile, you look right in the camera, and then you start. Hi, my name's David Obelcz. How are you doing? And if you do that with ease, you're making each of your points in your videos. First of all, when you go through, if you're going to slice and dice a couple little pieces out, it makes it real easy because you created these natural pauses. The second thing is whenever you start all of your sentences, you're looking right in the camera, you have a nice smile, and people feel you're more approachable in that. So the other thing is if you're presenting and you are waiting to say maybe to go on in a video conference, maybe something that you want to do as you're waiting for your turn is settle, take that deep breath. And when you know that cue's coming up, make sure you have that smile when you start, because that is just going to be a lot more impactful. Here's the next thing, some other tips you should keep in mind. You need to cut your words in half or more. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you wrote a 300-word blog and you want to create a little video to promote your blog. And you wrote a blog using SOAR and figuring out your audience and all that are good stuff. In your video, you can't do 300 words because you just made a video that's about 2 minutes to 2 minutes, 15 seconds long. And that's if you talk fast. The most you're going to be able to squeeze in is about 150 words in a minute. And if you're trying to, and then that assumes that you haven't worked with an agency like us, or you don't have the skill set that you created an intro or an outro with a call to action. That's just 1 minute of you talking. So you need to cut your words down. The maximum number of words that you can squeeze in without people going, they sound like the guys at the end of the TV ads going over all of the conditions when I'm trying to get a loan, is about 150 words. You really want to target for a minute for maybe more like 100. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, 100 words is not a darn tootin'. It's not a lot to work with. And that's why you need to use visuals. What you need in effective storytelling is use visuals that then align to the story that you're trying to tell if you're doing a video, because then that helps fill in the words that you're not talking about. And then you can just focus on the key points. And then the most critical thing is don't damage your own personal brand. And what do I mean by that? If you're going to create a video, either because of business or because, I've always wanted to make videos for myself, and now I have the time to start doing these little videos and putting up on my LinkedIn feed, or I'm going to start doing something on Instagram. If you're coming across disjointed and ums and ahs and all your ticks are showing out and the lighting's not good and the audio's not good, I did say the quality bar is lower, but it's still not that low. And if you create something that looks really bad, it's going to reflect poorly on you, even if you had a great story. Because what people are going to focus on is how the video quality was. They're not going to focus on your message anymore. So here's the advice. If you are not a self-deprecating person, a lot of people aren't comfortable on camera. If you're not comfortable, right? If you're a person that is comfortable on camera, if you're looking at it and going, I don't know, you should listen to that voice. That's one. If you are very self-critical, if you hate yourself on camera and you're looking at it going, oh God, just no. Show it to a trusted friend or show it to a trusted colleague and get their feedback. Because what I have found in my experience when it comes to video and storytelling is people who don't like being on camera are actually way more self-critical, and their stuff is like, that's actually pretty good. That's fine. It meets the bar. So I want to share some storytelling resources with you. Some of them are free, some of them cost money, some of them have a free component, and some of them have a paid component. The first one is Grammarly. If you haven't installed Grammarly, go install Grammarly. Go do it. You can do the free version or the paid version. Get it. Period. End of story. Like, not right now. Make that one of the first things you do at the end of this. Install Grammarly. Grammarly helps you with your grammar, and it's not perfect, but it is way better than the grammar tools that are available in Google Docs and Microsoft Word. It is vastly better, and the quality of their plugins into all of these different platforms are also much better. And the other thing is that Grammarly plugs into many websites, for instance, like LinkedIn and Facebook, and it can help you avoid landmines that damage your brand. Go install it. Go do it. The next one is MindMaster. MindMaster is online software, and what MindMaster allows you to do is mind map out your story. It allows you to kind of go, I have a functional buyer. Their motivation is their value system, and I want to convince and write, and then my 3 points that I want to tell are this, and I want to do it in this order. And it allows you to visually map all of that out so that if you're overwhelmed with the task and all of this inputs that I gave on here's what you need to consider, then you can do that. The next one is SlideShare. David, you told me don't overuse PowerPoint. But SlideShare is a good resource to be able to go to borrow, I hate to say steal, borrow good ideas, and also possibly look at stuff and go, ew, I don't want to do that. And the nice thing about SlideShare is people, right, the things that are getting attention are the good decks. The things you have to keep in mind when you're looking at something in SlideShare, is it the quality of the slides or is it the quality of the story? You may be looking at SlideShare and you can get ideas in effective storytelling, but you also can get ideas in effective slides. The next one is videos. Now, videos is one that I'm like, because we do things. If you, meaning things, we do video production, we do different marketing things. If you just want to create a couple, like dabble, I want to create a little intro thing. I want to create a little end card thing. And I don't want to go pay some design house to do this because I just want it for me. Videos is a great resource. So Videos is a cloud service that the subscription, I think you pay like $60. That's why I say it's like, you pay like $60. And I think they actually have a lifetime special going on right now for less than that. And you can go ahead and pick intros or outros, and then you can upload a logo or a picture. You can change the text that's in there, and you can change the colors, and it's all very, very simple. And then you can go, why, yes, make that video for me. And it can make a nice little 15-second intro or a nice little 5-second outro. They are not, I want to be really clear, this is not like professional grade stuff, but this also looks like some 7-year-old made it. It's somewhere in between. And so if you're a small business owner, you have a tight budget, or again, if you want to do compelling storytelling and you're just like, I want to start making some videos, this is a great resource. This is not a substitute for video production companies that know what they're doing, but it is a good thing for that. The next one's Adobe Spark. I'm a big fan of Adobe Spark. There's a paid version, there's a free version, and Adobe Spark is great for creating still visuals, and they have things where you can create slideshows, which are kind of videos. They don't have a video component in their portfolio of solutions in there, but they are great for social media. And if you were trying to create, like you've written, say, a 50-word post that you want to put in on LinkedIn, without a visual to get people's attention, you just have words. Think about it, right? You go to your LinkedIn feed and you scroll. You're generally not stopping at the text. You're only going to stop at text if you recognize the person's name and you really like and respect and have a deep connection. But if there's a compelling visual there, which is critical to storytelling, that visual is going to get you to stop. And Adobe Spark will enable you to create really compelling visuals. And you don't have to be a graphic designer to do it. Again, is this a substitute for a professional designer in a professional setting? No. Is this something you can use quick and dirty? Absolutely. And you will not damage your brand. People will go and go, wow. Can you use Adobe Spark as a professional tool? Absolutely. It can be used as a very, very high-end tool in creation of social media content in particular. But you generally need to have an eye for design in doing that. So there are 5 resources that you can use to help tell your compelling story. I want to say that I have a free download, so thank you for participating. If you go to bit.ly, so bit.ly/BHG Storytelling, Baden Hill Group, BHG Storytelling, you can download our free ebook, Creating Buyer Personas. Creating Buyer Personas is all about mind mapping your particular story. And there's a very, very detailed book, really detailed, that goes deep into how you can create those personas. And with that, I will open the floor up to any questions that people may have.
Thank you, David. That was very insightful. I don't know that I've got any questions, but I do know that I've learned an awful lot of things there. One of the things that I was really interested in is you not only use the rule of 3 in a very effective way, but you also, I think, gave good examples of that. So I'd just like to, it's more of a comment and an observation. Thank you for that, because it kind of really resonated with me. The other thing is that you talked about background, and I look at your background and it's extremely busy and I think maybe a little bit entertaining for me. I'm sure there's a story behind each of those coffee mugs and, race cars and everything else, but that's for another day.
Definitely for another day. But yes,